Good morning everyone, thanks for joining me in this video. I am Okochapi Marcel and this is Friday, the 5th day of September 2025. How many of you know that if you join Nigerian Army, Nigerian Navy or Air Force, you can't resign until you complete a compulsory 50 years. After the 50 years, if you want to resign, you can resign. This is a slavery. It is not a service. So this is what led this lawyer Nnamdi, a human rights lawyer, a very big, thank you to him. He went to court, industrial court for that matter, and the court now set aside the compulsory retirement or the compulsory service, of the armed forces before they could resign. A lot of my friends who are in the army, who want to resign, this is the excuse they used to give me that they can't resign before they get to 15 years. Now, the court has set it aside and said that anybody can resign. Army, Navy, or Air Force, they are not a slave ground where people can be tied until they get to 15 years. The court ruled that this is against their fundamental human right. But I'm having a big problem. The big problem I'm having is the response of the Nigerian Army, which is contrary to the Constitution. You see, this country is now ruled by interest. This country is not ruled by Constitution any longer. No place in Nigeria where Constitution is working. How can you tell me that Constitution is working when the army is working contrary to the Constitution, the presidency is working contrary to the Constitution, and everybody is just living as if everything is normal? No, we are living in a total bondage. Anyway, I want you to take a listen to what Nnamdi explained about the victory in court, why so many soldiers are languishing in prison. They are being tortured because they just expressed their intention to resign. So many of them, including the controversial ex-man that you used to see on social media, his intention was, I want to resign, but the military said, no, you are not up to 15 years, you can't resign. So these are the issues. Take a listen to this human rights lawyer, Nnamdi, while I come back to, to elucidate the response of the Nigerian army towards the position of the industrial court. Take a listen.
Of course, the decision of the National Industrial Court is binding on all authorities and persons throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria by virtue of Section 287 of the Constitution. The armed forces, which has three components, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, they are agencies of government, they are institutions of government, and they are bound by the Constitution. They are creations of the Constitution. They are subjected to the Constitution. They are subjected to the jurisdiction of the courts established by the Constitution. So the question of whether they will be bound doesn't even arise, because even under military regime, and this is the point that we must continue to stress, court judgment, even the military, were even sometimes more open to obeying decisions of court. So on this issue, the court has taken a position, and this has been the jurisprudence of the National Industrial Court on this issue. That, look, you cannot simply say that because someone has offered to wear the uniform to serve his country, therefore, by fire by force, at gunpoint, that the person must continue to serve Nigeria. What the Industrial Court has done is logical, it is just, by simply resetting that, look, by virtue of Section 306 of the Constitution, which is the basis upon which I went to court on behalf of my client, every public officer or every person elected, appointed, or is selected to an office appointed or created by the Constitution or recognized by the Constitution has the right to resign at any time. And that resignation is effective upon the receipt of the letter or the correspondence communicating that person's intention to resign. So what has happened in this particular case is a very sad example of the extent of injustice, the extent of the moral depravity, the abominable repression that the institution of the armed forces of Nigeria, has represented, particularly on this case. This is a man, my client, who joined the armed forces through the NDA, the Nigerian Defense Academy. He was selected in his final year in 2013 among the best in his set. He was selected for a course in the United States to be trained as a fighter pilot. While in the US, his allowances were not paid for about 5 months. In July 2014, he was suddenly recalled back to Nigeria without any explanation, thereby truncating what was supposed to be his opportunity for career progression. As if that was not enough, the authority of the Air Force, for about a year after they recalled him from the US from its course, did not assign him to any unit. They just left him hanging. And then he remained on one course as a flight officer for about 6 years, which is supposed to ordinarily be about 4 years. He was not promoted. His classmates were promoted. And let me also mention to you that series of actions were taken and targeted at this gentleman, clearly showing that the authorities of the Air Force did not want him for reasons best known to him. So the other part of the reason why he had to insist on resigning was that his own father served Nigeria in the army. His mother just retired just a few years ago as a senior officer of the Nigerian army. So this is a man who joined the armed forces based on a family history of devotion to the Nigerian armed forces. But guess what? The Nigerian army dealt ruthlessly with his father. His father's property, very close to the American embassy, Walter Carrington, where he had these boats that, that place was leased to him by the Nigerian Inland Waterways. He has done this business over the years. Some nefarious elements in uniform, including generals, out of great personal pursuit, attacked this man's business, set fire on his boat, chased his worker out. But this was somebody who served the army. Someone that the Inland Waterways had given license to do business. He had not trespassed on the property of the army, but people in the army had business interest in his business. Destroyed his business, set everything on fire. He went to court and won them. The court ordered the army to vacate the place. The army refused. The officials of the court went to enforce the judgment. They were beaten and chased away. The army went on appeal. The appeal was lost. In 2017, I personally wrote a petition on behalf of Chief Akerele to the House of Reps. The House again passed a resolution, ordered the army to vacate the property and pay him 100 million. Again, they flattered that resolution. So while we were still fighting for Chief Akerele died without getting justice. His son, who was in the Air Force, is also being subjected to the same vicious victimization. He could no longer take it. And he said, look, I have served for almost about 10 years. I don't need pension. I'm not asking you for, and by the way, in our claims in court, we didn't ask for pension. We didn't ask for anything. We did not ask for a cover from the Air Force. We simply said, look, this man has undertaken interest in civilian endeavors. Allow him to go. They said no. What did the Chief of Army Staff did? He issued a signal for his arrest, declared him a wanted. Guess what? Nigerians should know. In this case of Flight Lieutenant Akerele, do you know that when he applied for voluntary retirement to exit service, to disengage, he was subjected to counseling. He was interviewed. His own commander who interviewed him, who counseled him, wrote recommending that they should allow him to go, that he can no longer contribute to the service. He had become demoralized. We even exhibited before the court an official position by the Chief of Defense Staff directing that any member of the armed forces who is not motivated and no longer has interest should be allowed to go. Guess what? Despite the recommendation of his commander and the officers who counseled him, on record, this thing was before the court, the Chief of A Staff still insisted that this gentleman should continue to serve. So it was on this premise that we said, look, that we cannot live in a situation where you will treat a Nigerian as if he's in a plantation, as if he's in a Nazi concentration camp. Because what they are telling us is that once you accept to wear the uniform to fight for Nigeria, to defend Nigeria, even if your life is at stake, you cannot leave. We went to court to file this action. And they came to court to say, the heading of the letter was voluntary retirement. It was not resignation. The court said no. We even cited a case to show that in the past, the Court of Appeal has said that, look, even when you say it is voluntary retirement, what the court must look at is the content of the letter. So the court interpreted the content of the letter and said, look, this man had clearly expressed the intention that he had no longer interest to serve. And the court went further yesterday, very interestingly, to declare the provisions of what the called HTACOS, the Harmonized Terms and Conditions of Service for Personnel of the Armed Forces, that says that an officer must serve for at least 15 years before you can disengage. They call it unconditional. And that was our argument. And that is a correct position. Because if you say you must serve for 15 years before you can disengage, it becomes slave labor. It becomes slave labor. And it is not a case that Nigeria is at war, that you say you are conscripting people like we have in between Russia and Ukraine now. So what is the basis for insisting that whether you like it or not, you must serve Nigeria? Meanwhile, the generals in the defense headquarters who are stealing billions meant for the welfare of soldiers, soldiers that cannot feed, soldiers that are not given uniform, soldiers that are not given arms to fight insurgents. We have seen some videos come out. Those soldiers, how many of them have been prosecuted? So you must address the welfare of officers. You cannot simply say you are not going to allow people to resign from service when you don't look at their complaints of victimization. Our soldiers are dying, our soldiers are underpaid, our soldiers' welfare are not catered for. This is a welcome judgment that is again made it clear that in this country there is still hope.
Very unfortunately, there is no hope for justice, as the military insists on 15-year exit rule despite court order. You know, after the court ruling yesterday, there was hope, and thousands of soldiers indicated interest that they are going to resign. I think this is what shook the Nigerian army to say that no, we are not going to abide with this court order. If we abide with this court order, we are going to lose half of the Nigerian soldiers within 24 hours. I mean within 24 hours, they will lose half of the Nigerian soldiers. So the defense headquarters has declared that the armed forces of Nigeria will continue to enforce the controversial 15-year minimum service requirement for personnel seeking voluntary exit, despite a recent court judgment striking down the rule as unconstitutional. It don't say it. So nobody obeys court order any longer. People do whatever they like. So tell me, what is your hope in this, in all these scenarios? Do you now see why the military mingle with the terrorists? They see them with AK-47. They don't ask them anything. They just live the way they want to live, as if nothing is important apart from their interest. You know, retirement is a voluntary something that if you are not willing to continue what you are doing, you resign. But the military, the Air Force, see, this dracona is from the military regime. It's from the military regime. The law they put during the military era is what is still ruling Nigeria today. I tell people that Nigeria is not sustainable. So if my son is in the Nigerian army, for example, he can't resign until he gets to 15 years. Before he gets to 15 years, he must have pushed to Boko Haram territories. They will kill him. Once you indicate interest, you want to leave, they will put you on the war front. Before the 15 years, you will die. I warn people about what to come. But people refuse to listen. Everybody, both the politicians, the flood court order, police flood court order, the SS, army, nobody obeys the rule of law any longer. And one man is coming out to tell us that we still have a place to call the country. The places that all these politicians used to travel to, what made the countries to be like that? Is it not rule of law? Anyway, it is what it is. I will always believe that Nigeria is not sustainable. Let me know what you think about this. I am Okocha Happy Marcel, a conflict reporter.